Hi, I'm Rob Dube, and I'm president of ImageOne and the author of the book Do Nothing and the leadership retreat, the Do Nothing Leadership Retreat. I'm really excited to join Dub today, where we're going to talk about this whole idea of do nothing, which is simply to sit in silence and pay attention to your thoughts and bring them back to your breath. And I know with these busy lives, that's a crazy idea to think of for many of us. So stay curious. I hope you'll listen in because you're going to learn a thing or two during our chat today.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, do you need to up-level your leadership? Well, on this episode, we dive into the pressures of leadership and entrepreneurship and the challenge to do way less rather than way more. How? Well, you'll have to catch the episode to find out. Remember, you can chat about this episode of the show or any other past episodes on our Facebook page. Simply go look on Facebook for Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. And we always need your help in staying relevant. So please go over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. When you do, go over to Facebook and let us know that you did that. Also, you can catch us on traditional radio stations across the U.S. every Monday and Thursday. We are all the way from Tampa, Florida to Colorado, Boulder, Colorado. We're everywhere, man. If you're a regular listener, big thank you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. By the way, you can also catch us on Google Home and Alexa by simply saying play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down, dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, sales leader, entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, you know that being an entrepreneur, growing a business, and potentially finding a life partner, and then maybe having some kids seems like an impossible balancing act where stress and anxiety become the everyday way of life. And maybe many things, as you juggle all that, maybe something's going to get dropped, maybe many things are going to get dropped. But what if you're going about it all wrong? What if instead of doing more, we actually need to do not less, but nothing? Well, is that even possible? Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out. Our guest today, Rob Dube, is the co-founder of ImageOne, a top 25 Forbes Small Giant company. He's the founder of Do Nothing, and is the author of a book with exactly the same name, Do Nothing, the most rewarding leadership challenge you will ever take. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Rob Dube!
That was the best.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. That was amazing. I'm exhausted.
Listen, before we start, I've got to ask you, how much shit did you get as a kid for your last name? Because it must have been Doobie Rob.
Doobie. Yeah, Doobie was definitely in high school, especially loved the Doobie.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like, how could you not be? Because your name is Dube, but it's spelt Doobie. And it's
Totally.
like your name is Bouquet, but no, it's spelt Bucket. So I remember when I first got the introduction to you, when we were chatting, I thought, oh my God, because I'm always fascinated by people getting shit for their names because, I understand it. And so like, Rob Dube. Yeah, I can imagine in high school that was a popular name.
For sure.
Who's your connection?
Sure.
Rob Dube.
Doobie will get you the doobie.
Doobie will get you the doobie. So tell us, who is Rob Dube and what makes you tick? Let's start there.
Okay. Let me start with how I got into all this, if that works for you.
Sure.
My best friend and I met in 6th grade, and then in 9th grade, we started selling these blow pop lollipops out of our locker, the kind with the gum.
Sure, that's what everybody calls them, lollipops.
I swear, they were lollipops, I swear.
Okay.
And I think at that time, the entrepreneurial bug bit us. And I like to tell that story because it resonates with so many people. They've either done it themselves with something else, or they know somebody who's done it. And so all throughout high school and college, we were always doing some sort of way to, make a buck, so to speak. And after graduating college, we decided to embark in a business of our own. And that's exactly what we did, which, all along it was so much fun. But when we got out of college, it was a whole nother story, because now it was real life. We had to make a living and we had to make financial decisions together. And our friendship was it definitely put to the test, over these years. Thank goodness to say we have worked very, very hard on our relationship together, and we are still the closest of friends, and that's always been the number one priority. So that's a little bit of insight into
right. So so the 6th grade, you said?
Yes.
So 6th grade, what's that? That's how old is that? That's like 12 or something?
Oh, yeah, I think something like that.
So 12 years old. Let's start there. Yeah. Why the frick were you making lollipops?
Well, it didn't happen till 9th grade, but Joel, my business partner, my best friend, his uncle owned a drugstore, and somehow we got the idea that we could sell these things out of our lockers. So, that's when it all kind of hit for us. And when we were making money and walking around the hallways with quarters bulging out of our pockets, it was a great feeling. And we really enjoyed taking care of all the kids with selling them the candy. So it was awesome. And it really fueled us for the future.
Yeah, because it's, think about that. I mean, this is what I'm saying about the entrepreneurial spirit, right? Because, as a kid, I worked from a very young age. I was entrepreneurial. I did stuff, whether it was washing somebody's car or trimming somebody's hedge or doing something to make some money on the side, And I know a lot of people around me didn't do that, and I wonder how many kids you went to school with who would have had some other opportunity, but didn't think, I'll sell candy from the store. So it's fascinating to me that was there in the two of you, and it's also fascinating that you've continued on as friends, because you and I talked about this last time we chatted, which is, even if your business had failed, the fact that you managed to keep your friendship is quite the achievement in and of itself.
Yeah.
Because that often is the destroying force.
Yeah. And people ask me about partnerships all the time, and they say, what's the secret and what's the magic to it? And really I think it's kind of a simple answer, but it's not easy to execute on. And it's simply, working really hard at your relationship together and putting your egos aside and knowing that first and foremost, the friendship needs to be at the forefront and everything else will come second. And, we're lucky we had the basis of trust. As we all know, every good relationship has a basis of trust.
Absolutely.
So we had that, already moving into this. So fortunately, through the ups and downs of business, as you know, and your vast experiences, all business has its ebbs and flows, and we've been able to keep it together and stay strong.
So in 2017, I think it was that you guys won the Small Giants. So you got into the top 25 Small Giants from Forbes. I think most people probably don't know what that is, and they certainly don't know what it's influenced from. And we'll go into that in a minute. But just tell us about first of all what it is and why it was important that you got named.
Yeah, well, first of all, there's a book called Small Giants, Companies That Choose to Be Great Instead of Big. Doesn't mean they're not big. It just means greatness comes first, and primarily focused on the totality of their team members' lives, people before profits. Again, not to say that you aren't profitable. Usually these companies are extremely profitable, in fact, best in class within their industries. So I got exposed to that book in 2006. And just to take you back a couple years prior to that, Joel and I had actually sold our company to a billion-dollar public company. And we were running the business as a wholly owned subsidiary. And first time in our career, we had been part of a large organization that was not entrepreneurial. And boy, was that a lesson. Very stressful, a lot of anxiety, a lot of executive turnover, very good people, but just not a lot of consistency. And a new CEO came in 2006, and he had a different vision for the company. And he approached us and asked us if we'd be interested in buying the company back. And we had just read this book, Small Giants, and it was good timing. We bought the company back, and we decided to get really focused on taking our culture to a whole nother level. And it's exactly what we did. So, and we still are on that journey today. We have a long way to go to do all of the things that we hope to do during our tenure with this company until we go off into the pastures and new people take over. But that's how I got involved with understanding what Small Giants was. I got involved with the community of Small Giants. And later on, about now 3-4 years ago, excuse me, Forbes created a partnership with the Small Giants community and decided to create a list of each year of the 25 companies that are exhibiting small giant qualities. And I'm humbled to say in 2017, somehow they chose us. And it was really quite an honor.
So let's go back a minute to something you just talked about, which is, particularly today, I see this a lot. The entrepreneur is starting a business, they grow that business, and the view is to sell it to something bigger who will come along and put a bunch of cash in their pocket, and away they go onto the next venture. The fact that, that happened to you seems like the goose that laid the golden egg. And then you bought the company back, so why wouldn't you decide to just go, we're out, and you go somewhere else and do something else? Because again, that's very entrepreneurial. We know entrepreneurs are ADD types, right? So, what it's fascinating to me, because there's this alignment, of course, of reading the book and Small Giants, but why did you decide to buy your own company back? Because I know in the work that we do with M&As, we've got a culture, there's a merger and acquisition, the culture is then screwed up. And now if we bought the same company back, we got to undo this culture to start back, as opposed to starting something new and just deciding what the culture is. So I find that a particularly fascinating piece, that you decided to buy back your own company, even at a cultural level, which clearly you're focused on.
Yeah. So in our case, it's funny that you say that, because we were making lists of what we had a 3-year contract with the company. So we were making lists as to what we were going to do next. And we were pretty excited about it, actually. Yeah. And so when we were presented with this opportunity to buy the company back, it wasn't a slam dunk. But one thing I have to give the acquiring company credit for is that they kept us as a wholly owned subsidiary. Mm-hmm. And they did not disrupt our culture. They did not put us on their systems. So our company was really still intact. It was the same people. And for the most part, the culture was similar. There were some changes because of the larger company, but we were still the same people. And we remembered, it wasn't so far behind us that we remembered what we were all about. So when we took over, or when we bought it back and Joel and I took over again, there was a real sense of relief, which I found out about, when this happened, that we were back and we were private again, and Joel and I were, the owners of the company again. And so I think those components, putting them all together was really what made sense for us.
How many employees did you have when you sold?
I think we had somewhere around 20 or so.
And when you bought it back?
Yeah. It was similar in size because
Right.
the company, we didn't really grow all that much, and it was in an 18-month period of time. So a lot didn't really change or happen during that period of time.
But you did go through a period, you and I talked about, where you were feeling enormously stressed and anxious and juggling all. Talk to us a little bit about that part of your world, because it's very different than where you're at now. And I just want people to have a perspective.
Thank you. So growing up, I'm going to actually go back to when I was younger, and then it'll segue into that period of time. But when I was growing up, I had some family challenges. I had some health issues, and I didn't know it at the time, but it was creating an awful lot of sort of ingrained stress and anxiety. So I was going about my life in that way. And when I think back on it now, I see it. I can see it more clearly why I was the way I was. Starting the business with Joel in 1991, right out of college. We weren't making a dime for like 5 years. And then it was, a quarter. So, money was tight. I got married in 1992, which was 1 year after we started the business. So, in fact, my wife and I actually lived with my father for a period of time. We had our first child in 1994. So within 5 years, I'd started a business, got married, had a child, and was making practically, hardly any money to support this whole thing. And so with this propensity for anxiety and stress, I wasn't being the best person I could be, and tried many things. Therapy was very useful. But after we sold the company, I happened to be, it was about 8 months after, and I was on vacation with my family, and I was working, very stressed out. And I had read about meditation as something that might be useful. And I remembered the article, but I didn't have anything with me. I was sitting there, I was like on the verge of tears, and I looked over at this chair, and I just said to myself, you know what? I thought about that article, and I just said, just go give it a try. Just go sit in that chair and just set the timer for 5 minutes and breathe in and breathe out and see how you feel. And I did, and I felt better. I felt calmer minded, clearer minded. My problems didn't go away. I was still frustrated. So, but I just felt calmer. I felt like I was better able to deal with some things. And I thought, boy, just sitting down and breathing is a useful thing. Yeah. And so I kind of dove into it and learned a lot more. And now I'm, a very, I'll soapbox about it all day.
Right. And we definitely want to go there. But before we do, I think I want to be considerate of our viewers and listeners in the context of being in that high stress. We live in the mega hustle world, where everybody's out hustling everybody else. I mean, it's now, people pride themselves on their anxiety. And I think that, with my background in the psychology side of things, I think that people don't realize that a lot of that is quote unquote normal. And what I mean by that is that there's a normalcy to it, meaning they grew up in a highly anxious environment. Would you be willing to share some of the stuff around your childhood and what set you up? Because you alluded to that, and I want to give our viewers and our listeners a sense of that for themselves, because I think we don't often realize that we're driven by things that are actually totally not aligned with who we are, but we put it in a framework that allows us to say, well, it's fine because I'm an entrepreneur. Well, yeah, but you're also killing yourself.
That's great. I'll give you the broad view. I will be specific on some things, but then just prompt me if you want more detail, because I don't want to go too deep if you don't want me to. But so my parents got divorced when I was 8, and a divorce for some, nowadays I think it could be handled. It's handled much more amicably sometimes. But back when I was 8, divorce was not common, and my parents didn't handle it the best. They did the best they could do based on what they knew. I know that now as I'm older, but at the time, it was a very difficult separation for me. My father was very interested in women throughout his time.
How very nice to say that. I have never heard it put that nicely. My father, on the other hand, I'm talking about me, my father on the other hand was a douchebag who would have jumped on the crack of dawn if he could get up early enough. But your dad was just interested in women.
Well, yes.
He worked for Avon?
That's good. That's good. Well, he's got a heart of gold, but when it comes to women, he just loves women. And so I saw that, I witnessed that, and it was difficult because, when you have your mom and your dad and they're supposed to be together, it's a difficult situation. So I had that. My mom was trying very hard to raise my sister and myself. It was extremely stressful for her. And so she was going back to school and getting an education, and she was pretty stressed out herself.
Sure.
And so, the combination of those two things, I think, really set the foundation for, what really started to become a very anxious life. I really desired some freedom when I was young, but my mom was holding on very tight, so she wasn't letting the leash go. And I'm now, again, looking back and learning much about this, I know that she was just trying to have some control in her life, but I needed the leash. And so that was extremely difficult, and that caused me to act out in all kinds of ways. I was drinking, and I was, Dube was involved. We'll use that term.
You're living up to your name.
And, I made it through school. I was an average student. I know I could have done better. But it also started, I didn't know this at the time, but these health issues that I had severe asthma, and I had eczema. I had, skin, dry skin that was all over my body. Is very uncomfortable. And I later found out and could correlate the fact that a lot of those health issues had to do with a lot of the stress and anxiety that I was dealing with, because it's later on in life, those things have gone away. So
yeah, that's what's interesting, is that you've managed to shift that. Now your book is Do Nothing.
Do nothing.
Right, which of course is the polar opposite to being an entrepreneur, the polar opposite to being even in business, and certainly very far away from that kid you just talked about. Talk to us about what you mean by do nothing, and how it is this greatest leadership challenge. Because, I just think that this is something that our listeners need to just, like, every part of them, I'm sure, are going, this guy must be on crack or something. Run a business and do nothing. But you're not suggesting that you run a business and do nothing. You're talking about this challenge to do nothing for periods. Talk to us about it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, do nothing. The idea of stopping, for, let's just say 15 minutes, a couple of times a day. I actually have people all the time tell me they don't have time to do that. So there's the first thing that we want to be aware of, is we're so busy, we don't have 15 minutes to stop and refresh ourselves. And so the world is moving at a pace that, quite frankly, I don't know how we're all dealing with it. And I think it may come to a head. Yeah, that's a great point.
I mean, we're not, right? Mental health issues are massive. 50% of CEOs, more than 50% of CEOs say they're lonely. Like, these are top level individuals who say they're lonely. Loneliness is at an epidemic level. You're absolutely right. We're so damn busy that we disconnect from ourselves first and then from others too.
Yes. Oh, that's so true. And so, I think what happens is our brains get wired for busyness. And so when it all stops, it's kind of uncomfortable. And a lot of people don't like the feeling of actually sitting and hearing their thoughts, jump around from one thing to the next. And the idea that you could try to bring your attention to your breath and then just let go and not try to be perfect at everything that you're doing and do things without judgment. Just spend a little bit of time each day kind of practicing that. Because when you can start to cultivate that skill, you can bring that into your day-to-day livelihood, and it makes a big difference. And it helps with us in terms of all this that's coming at us. And it helps us do things a little bit more aware, with a little bit more presence, a little bit more empathy, and all the things that we could build on. And then as entrepreneurs, as leaders, the listeners to your show, to show up. This isn't about literally going and doing nothing and like goofing off or not. This is actually about really showing up with real presence, a clear mind. How many leaders do we know that are bopping from one meeting to the next? They barely have time to stop and go to the bathroom. And, they're on edge, and, you're sitting in a meeting or with team members, and you're half checking your phone and you're half paying attention to what's going on. You're not at your best. And people feel that. They feel that energy. And, that's not, I know, the types of leaders that we want to be.
No, but I think that's a very good point, is that the distinction between the kinds of leaders we want to be and the kind of leaders we feel we have to be. And I think that so often we don't realize there is another choice. It just doesn't seem possible. That you and I talked about that. I meditate and I do those kinds of things too. But, it's the same thing with working out. I mean, I know that if I don't make the time to work out, I don't have time to work out. It's that simple. I don't. If I don't put it in my schedule, I won't work out. Not because I don't want to work out. I love working out. It's because I'm too damn busy, and I can always fill that time. And I think that's one of the things we all forget. You can always fill the time. But you, in that first, being on holiday, being anxious, and you seeing that chair and deciding to just sit and focus on your breath. Let's talk to that for a minute, because I think that's really important. Because I think that I know that there's a lot of misconceptions around meditation. It's all, and we got to go to got to go live on top of the mountain and go to the Buddhist temple or whatever it is. And you and I know it's far simpler than that. So and I know you've led your own events around this, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But just let's give our listeners a way to say, okay, I want you to meditate for 1 minute. How, like somebody says, okay, I don't have time. You go, okay, you got a minute. Can you make a minute? You go, yeah, okay. What would you say to the person who's going, I don't have 5 minutes. I can give you one. What would you say? Mm-hmm.
So just so I'm clear about your question, what would I say to convince them to take a minute, or how would I show them?
How would you guide them? Yeah,
how would I guide them?
Practicality. Yeah.
So I'd say grab a chair, sit down on a chair, and take your back off the back of the chair. So you're sitting dignified with a posture that's not too rigid and not too soft. And feel your feet on the ground. Ground yourself for a moment. And put your hands on your legs gently and feel what that feels like. Start to bring your awareness. And as you go up and feel that posture again, bring your chin down slightly, and then your gaze down slightly, a foot or two in front of you, kind of a blurry gaze, or close your eyes. That's what I choose to do. I choose to close my eyes, and then just settle in for a moment. And as you settle in, you'll start to notice very quickly that you're thinking about many things. And that's normal, because when we meditate, we're not actually trying to clear our mind. We're trying to just work on becoming aware of our thoughts without judgment. And when you notice your thoughts, you just became aware. And when you notice and become aware, just bring your attention to something that you take for granted each and every day. And that is the fact that you're breathing. And follow your breath in through your nose into your midsection and back out through your nose, breathing normally, no special way to breathe, just breathing normally. And just keep doing that. And within moments, your thoughts will start to drift away, and you'll start to be thinking about the next meeting or the thing you could have done better yesterday and the thing you're going to do great tomorrow. And when you notice that, bring your attention back to your breath, because you just became aware again. And awareness is what you're practicing. And so you'll sit quietly for your minute and you'll do that. And there'll be that brief millisecond where you just had that attention on your breath and you were fully aware in the moment, fully present.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you for allowing me to do that.
I want people to grasp it, because I think there's a lot of illusions around mindfulness. There's a lot of illusions around meditation. It's all robes and, and all this, and it's not.
Yes.
It's not. And one of the things I'll say to people is, if you've ever had a moment where you're stirring your coffee and your thoughts didn't go anywhere but stirring your coffee, you were meditating.
Yeah.
That was it. And you go, oh, so it doesn't take a special pillow and a gong? No, it's like any moment you can just be fully, absolutely present with anything. And I'm going to give everybody this exercise right now. I want you to think about somebody you love. I want you to think about your life partner, your best friend, your kid, and just go and be in front of them and just look into their eyes for 5 seconds. And don't allow yourself to go anywhere but in their eyes. You can think about what you love about them if you like, but just be with them for 5 seconds and see how much love you feel for them and how much love they feel from you. And you didn't say shit. You didn't say anything. You didn't tell them they were fabulous. They didn't stroke you and tell you how wonderful you were. You didn't stroke each other's hair or hold hands or do a kiss. You just were present. And it's what's missing in our freaking lives. We're so damn busy. We're not, as you said, Rob, so brilliantly, we're not present. And it's not about, people go, well, I just don't have you don't need a half an hour, 5 seconds to just start. And then, like you said, a minute to just breathe. And this is what we don't understand, that life is a meditation. Mm-hmm. How present you are with it, well, that's a whole other thing. Mm-hmm. So I love that. Now you and I talked about, you've gone on to do these silent retreats, and you've even run these events for leaders around the U.S. who've flown in from all different parts of the U.S. to be with you. Talk to us a little bit about this. Why is this appealing? How is this appealing to the chicken-headed leaders running around?
That's great. Well, as a little bit of background, I read, as I was doing much of my fact finding, I'm a fact finder, early on, I read that meditation retreats can be really useful to help cultivate your practice. And I had a lot of fear around the idea of not talking for any period of time. And so I decided to give it a shot, and I went out to the West Coast to a place called Spirit Rock. And I did a day-long silent retreat. And so when I say day-long, it was 8 to 6 or something like that. So it wasn't even overnight. And I found it to be much easier than I imagined. And so I decided to try a longer retreat. And I went on a 7-day silent retreat. Again, a lot of fear around the idea of doing this. I was very nervous. And I went on the 7-day retreat, and I found that to be extremely impactful. The process that I've heard and that I experienced myself in a general sense, it's not, scientific, but in a general sense, it takes about 2 to 3 days to allow the surface thoughts that you've got rolling around in your head to sort of start to dissipate a little bit. And then the next level starts to show itself. And sometimes that's, hard, and sometimes it's really exciting, or anything in between. But it needs to come up because it's been down there. And it's really an impactful period of time as you go through that. And your awareness gets extremely heightened, no matter what it is. It could be out in nature during that time. It could be just sitting while you're meditating. It could be noticing the people around you. On my first retreat, I sat behind a woman who wore her hair in a bun. And my daughter wears her hair in a bun sometimes. And even telling this story, I get kind of chilled about it, because I just would look at the bun and I would start to tear up. Because it was that heightened of an experience for me.
Yeah.
Food takes on a new, a new taste and a new sensation. You go slower with things. And, as I started to do this twice a year. I do this as a health and wellness practice, for myself. It's like re-energizing my brain and my body at the same time. I started to notice when I would come back that my life flowed a little bit better. It didn't change the difficult things and the wonderful things and everything in between. That was all the same. It was just my ability. And I like to use this phrase that is attributed to Viktor Frankl. It's simply that moment between stimulus and response. And that moment is a moment that we get to choose our happiness, and that's the critical part of this whole thing, is being able to choose in that moment between stimulus and response.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things you talked about there was your nervousness, fear of going to do this. What do you think you were afraid of in going into that situation?
Well, I think the unknown, for starters.
Sure.
But as I continue to do these, and I have to tell you, every time I go, I get nervous. And I think this is my own take on it, so sure. I don't know, but I think it has to do, first of all, with what am I going to miss? All the excitement of being in business, and it takes on an energy. And so, stopping it, it's kind of an abrupt stop. You kind of go from going really fast to not going, and it's a scary feeling, like the idea of just sort of stopping and turning it all off. No emails, and there's no reading. There's no journaling. In fact, eye contact is even discouraged. So you're really within yourself. And that can be scary too, because subconsciously you don't know what's going to arise, and maybe you kind of don't want it to, in a way. But in my sense, it needs to come up, and if you're in an environment, for myself, my own experience, where I know it's safe and I know I'm allowing these things to come up without judgment, I'm not there to solve. Yeah, sure, my brain goes to solve sometimes, but that's just happening. I'm not there to figure it out. I'm there to just allow it to be, again, without judgment. And that's a really unique thing that gets to happen on retreat, because what are we doing as leaders, or just as people in life? We're always dealing with challenges and trying to solve them, and striving and going fast. And so, it's a real special time to be able to do kind of the opposite.
But I think that we're so identified with ourselves as leaders. We're so identified with being busy, with being winners, with being A-types, with being all those things, that I know for me, the very first time I did a silent retreat, I think I was 22 at the time. Now I can see how deeply identified I was with being this go-getter. And there was something directly in clash to my identity to not go getting to actually. And so what did I do? I went and got meditation. I was like, I am going to meditate. I'm going to be the best meditator. Oh shit. Why won't my brain shut up? Right. Because I took my identity and put it into my meditation. And when I sat with Parthasarathy, who was my teacher, he said, when do you meditate? And I said, every day. Every day. And he said, when do you meditate? And I said, well, I meditate in the morning, but if I get stressed, I'll meditate then. And he goes, don't meditate while you're stressed. And I said, why? He goes, an agitated mind is an agitated meditation. And he goes, you're just magnifying. I was like, what? And it was this realization that I'd taken my identity into the whole process. And this is one of the things I just loved about when we first spoke, is that you got it. That this is actually not about trying to get an A. And I think that many of us who are A-type personalities, we look at, okay, well, I'm going to be mindful. I'm going to get an A in mindfulness. Well, guess what? There's no freaking score. You don't get an A. You don't get a D minus. You don't get anything. You get a moment. You get a moment. And sometimes you get 3, 4, maybe even 20 moments strung together. I remember one of my meditation strategies was to learn how to be present for 100 breaths counting back. And every time I got thoughts running through my head, I had to go back to 100 and start again. It took me 4 years. 4 years, I made it to 0. And guess where I make it to now? It depends on the day, but, might make it as far as 85, maybe. So it's this wonderful thing, is it's constantly evolving.
I love that. I like to tell a story about when I first embarked on this, and I decided that, as you said, I wanted to be the best meditator around. And so I sought out a teacher, and I found somebody locally, and I went, and she's a psychologist as well. I made an appointment to go see her, and I went into her office, sat on her couch, and she said, her name is Donna Rockwell, and she said to me, what would you like to talk about today? And I said, actually, I'm not here to really talk about anything. I'm hoping you'll teach me how to meditate. I understand you're a meditation teacher. And she said, oh, yeah, wonderful. What have you been doing before we get, before I share anything? And I said, well, all I've been doing is sitting in this chair, kind of sitting up and breathing in and breathing out. And she said, it sounds like you're doing it pretty well, but I'll sit down with you. We can try it anyway. And she set up these 2 chairs across from each other, and we sat down, and she kind of did what we did a little bit earlier, the 2 of us. And we did that for 10 minutes. And at the end, when we opened her eyes, she looked at me and I said, how'd I do? And she said,
do I get a gold star?
yeah, right. She said, you did fine. There's no wrong way to do this. And I said, okay, great, fantastic. But I know I can get better, and I'm really looking forward to working with you. And she said, you don't need to work with me anymore. You got it. You get the concept. Just keep practicing. And I said, I will keep practicing, but I'm coming back. And I did. I came back the next week, and she shook her head. She said, you want to do this again? Okay. And we did the same thing, 10 minutes. And at the end, I said, how'd I do? She said, you did fine. And then it clicked that, it's a very simple thing to do. It just takes a little bit of discipline, and just keep practicing.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Now, I want to sort of change gears a little bit, because I want to talk about, because now you're running these retreats, right? You
Yes.
also run them, and you've had leaders come in. Tell us about that, because again, this is kind of another business, if you will, right? So,
Sure.
so talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, after a retreat a few years back, I entered into a difficult situation, and it must not have been that difficult, because I don't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember thinking, oh, wow, I handled that pretty well. And I thought, wow, these retreats have been really helpful for me. And I'm talking to peer entrepreneurs and leaders all the time. And, the common thread is everyone's just really stressed out. And I thought, boy, I wish I could share this with people, because it's just been so helpful for me. And I was sharing this with a friend, and he said, oh yeah, you ought to, write a book about it and put together a retreat or something. And it kind of planted a seed for me. And
Right.
Fast forward, I did do the book, and then I created a vision, and my vision was to be able to host some retreats. And so I started doing that. And it's funny that you said Boulder, Colorado at the outset. I don't know if the universe was coming together or whatever, but I do host the retreat currently. It's just outside of Boulder in Fort Collins, up in the beautiful mountains of the Red Feather Lakes at a retreat center. And so I've been having leaders really from all over the world come in, and we do a 4-day retreat. And 100% of the people have their expectations exceeded, and the silence for all of them, down to the last person, was not as hard as they imagined. So, it's been a really special thing to be a part of, and I'm just there to serve. I don't participate. I'm the host, and I'm hospitality. So I just want everybody to be comfortable and be able to do something that they don't do a whole lot of, which is just really focus on their own self and their own well-being. So when they leave, they can go back to their day-to-day and show up in a way that they weren't showing up before.
That's cool. One of the things I wrote about in my book, Fiercely Loyal, was I talked about the companies who are really excelling are the ones who are committed to community. And I talked about building a community inside of your own company, of the culture, that's community. Then there's a community that you live in. And then there's a community of your echelon or your industry. And I know that, for you in these retreats, you're really creating a community of mindful leaders. So that's a community inside of the echelon that you're in. But you're also involved in the community in a more general sense too, with your desire and your willingness and your commitment to raise financial literacy. Tell us a little bit about that, because that's another important part of the community work.
Wow. Thank you. That's one of my favorite topics, because it really goes back to the Small Giants journey. And along the way, I was fortunate enough to become friends with the author of Small Giants, Bo Burlingham. And Bo, who was the former editor of Inc. magazine, I might add, who ranked your podcast number one business podcast. So he introduced me to somebody by the name of Jack Stack. And Jack is very well known for a book called The Great Game of Business, which he co-wrote with Bo. And it basically is about empowering your team members, your employees, and teaching them financial literacy, teaching them how to read an income statement and a balance sheet, and then sharing the numbers with them, opening up your books and letting them see how you're doing. And at the outset, that was a concept that was very foreign to me. And again, very scary, very scary. And as we got into it, specifically 5 years ago, we were having a down year. And it was the first time in our history where we were about midway through the year. And if things kept going the way they were going, there was a chance we might actually lose money that year. And we hadn't lost money ever. And so I was pretty nervous. And we had a strong balance sheet. So I knew we could, get through it. But I don't want to lose money.
No.
Ever. I don't like that. I don't like the look of that number on the income statement. So there were 3 or 4 of us sitting around in a conference room trying to figure it out. And I said, you know what the problem with this conversation is? That the 4 of us are trying to figure it out. We don't have the answers. The people outside of this room are the ones with the answers, because they're involved with the day-to-day stuff at the ground level. And they know the little tweaks and the little differences that can really make a big difference. And I remembered a conversation that I had with Jack Stack about this. And so I just drew on that and I said, we need to open the books, and I'll take the role to do it. But I have to tell you guys, I'm scared, because I think I know how to read an income statement and a balance sheet. But now that the idea of having to actually teach it, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer the questions. But then I thought about it and I decided, who cares? I'm just going to let the team know that I'm going to do my best. I've been reading income statements and balance sheets for a long time, but I'm sure there's a lot I don't even understand. And there was. And
Wow.
so I'm the one who really got the education. And so as I started teaching it and they started asking questions and I would get answers, I learned it better. They learned it better. And then we were all, getting on the same page and understanding what was going on. I like to tell this simple story about our inventory level and how it all connected with our team members. Our inventory level was at $1.5 million. I'm rounding up. Mm-hmm. And we were asked during in this small industry group that we're a part of during one of our meetings why our inventory was so high compared to the size of our business. We didn't have a good answer. We just said, I guess
because it is.
Yeah, because it is, right? Well, they said, it just seems like it's too high. And so we started to put a focus on that once we opened the books. And what people around the country who worked for us started to realize was that when our inventory levels were high, that meant we had less cash in the bank, which meant we had to draw on our line of credit, which meant we paid interest, which meant we made less money, which meant that was not as good for everybody. And all those dots were connected. And once they connected, I remember we have a team member in Des Moines, Iowa, who was at the time, he was like 25 years old. And I was there and I visited with him and he explained to me that it just clicked for him. So he was assessing all of his inventory and figuring out where we could send it to different locations in the country so we could move it or turn it, or getting it back to our main office so we could either return it back to the vendor and maybe, not at full price, but get something back for it in terms of cash, or redeploy it from our main office. It's 25-year-old.
That's amazing.
All he needed was the education to make really good decisions. And so, opening the books, ever since we did that in 2014, we did turn a profit that year. And each year subsequent to that, we've had our best years in business. So I'm a big proponent of opening the books. And
that level of financial transparency is extraordinarily rare. And as you said, most people are afraid, not only that they might look not so smart, but also that of revealing the truth. I mean, it's the big I am. We all see the big the entrepreneurial ads on Facebook of the guy standing by his Ferrari and his Lamborghini and his big house and his swimming pool and his private jet and all the rest of it. Let's see what you really got in the bank. That's a whole different story altogether. There's a guy living in a big white house in Washington, D.C., and, you can't see his taxes either, because it's going to reveal the truth about something that's less than the bravado, less than the image. And I'm not talking about him particularly, but I'm talking about in all of us, we don't do that. And so I think it was incredibly courageous. And what I want to say here is that leadership requires courage. I believe that real, true leadership requires courage. What is the most difficult leadership decision you've had to make in your life?
Well, it always has to do with people, always, early on when I had to make those decisions, I didn't do that well. I didn't treat people like the true humans that they are. I just looked at them as an employee and it wasn't working and we had to part ways. And, not to say that I was a jerk about it, but I don't think I had the same approach that I have nowadays. And the way we practice it nowadays is, more mindful. We call it mindful transitions. So we want to work with the people and as humans, as just regular people like myself, and help them get to a good place. So always people issues. I remember we had a team member, I'll give you a specific example where this was back when we finally started to identify our core values, and we started to recognize who fit those values and who didn't. And so we had a team member who had been with us for a bit of time, and she was excellent at her job, but she was not adhering to our core values. And we started to realize, they have to get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it. And she had the capacity to do it. She wanted the job, but she didn't get it. And that was hard for her to understand. And that was hard for us to communicate. And so we had to part ways, and that was painful early on, having to make that first decision based on core values. And we didn't handle it well at all. And so, those, I guess, are some of the lessons that we draw to do things better in the future. But that's definitely one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to deal with.
Yeah, I think that being a purpose-driven, values-based organization is a lovely concept, but it's living to it. I did a video recently that I put up on my new leadership skills on my YouTube channel, where I talked about knowing the difference between rules and boundaries. And rules are things that people will bang up against constantly, but boundaries are like, this is our values. This is not about you. This is about us. This is our values. You want to be part of that? That's great. You don't? It's okay. There's a better job for you somewhere else. And oftentimes as leaders, we'll trade your skill set for our values, right? We'll go, you're a rocking salesperson, but you're a complete douchebag, but we really want the sales. So, the fact that you don't agree with integrity, and we're all about integrity or honesty, we'll kind of suck that up for a while because we've had a low year. Well, you're going to be out of business morally, if not financially, pretty quickly.
Yes, that's the greatest example. I love that. The salesperson example is always the best.
Yeah, because we measure so much of our business by the bottom line, and the bottom line is your people. It's not your profit, and that's what you were saying right early on. As a leader, as leaders, particularly conscious leaders, mindful leaders, I believe that leaders are committed to growth, and I often like to have my guests share something that they're working on themselves, within themselves, in their own humanity, because I think it's easy for somebody watching, listening to say, oh yeah, but one day, but I'm not at where Rob is at. And I think that we all got to get off the frickin' pedestals and realize that, everybody's struggling, battling with something. What is something that you're working on to grow and develop in yourself, Rob?
Well, letting go is part of it, and recognizing really, truly what my strengths are and where I can be of best service to the organization and to the world. I feel like with our company, I've gotten it to a certain point, and I don't know that I'm really the best person to take it to the next level. And so, we put in place a succession plan and found somebody who is much better suited to take us to our 2026 vision. And that's been a definitely challenging part of the journey for me, is to come to that realization and be able to come to terms with where I fit best. And now I'm excited about it, but it's something that I've been working on very much over the last couple of years. And so, that's it's been an interesting part of the journey for me.
Yeah, it's fascinating how many leaders struggle with succession because, again, identity, right? I am the company. Without me, the company will fall apart. And oftentimes, I know because I've worked with founders who don't realize they're actually sabotaging their own company so that when they walk away, they can go, yeah, but it fell apart without me. Because they're so ingrained in the identity rather than in the service of. Right? The business is a vehicle to be service of, and you were just simply driving the vehicle for a while. But now it's time to get out and let somebody else drive who can take it on paths that you could never go on. And this is the great lesson for us as leaders, is that even our own vision is limited by us.
Yes.
We need someone else to step into that with some fresh eyes and some fresh juice. Just as long as as you said, as long as the values code and the purpose code is solid. If that's not solid, you might be going to hell in a handbasket. But if you've got those rock solid, then it's like, okay, this is what we're about. Okay, how do we live more in line with those values? How do we live more in line with that purpose? How do we fulfill what it is that we're here to serve in the world, that's a very different
Yes. The idea that the organization is there to serve the owner or the entrepreneur is not in alignment, at least for myself, for others that works for them. But I think that the organization is there to serve the people that are part of it. Absolutely. And I happen to be the owner and 50% shareholder along with my business partner. So there are two shareholders, and that's what we are. We're shareholders. We happen to have a role in the company. And if we're not the best at our role, we should step aside and allow somebody to take the company to new heights so it serves the people. And that's going to serve the shareholders quite well.
It's interesting because I actually just spoke about this in an event I did. Where, Branson said, take care, put your people first, put your customers second, put your shareholders third. And I said, why don't shareholders take a greater position? And here's what I mean by that. Let's break the word down. Shareholders. Why are you holding on to what you should share? Right? Your job is to share, right? And you only hold it long enough to share it. And we're not talking about profits, although that could be part of it, but to share what this is about, to share who we are and how we serve is so powerful and important. As we come towards the end of the show, and it's flown by, which is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell us what's a guilty pleasure for Rob Dube?
Oh boy, that's a really good question. A guilty pleasure for me is really just sitting around on like a Saturday or a Sunday with my wife, and we enjoy especially watching college football. Any team,
really?
We love the majesty of it all, and we'll just sit there on a Saturday afternoon together and kind of do nothing.
That's very cool. Of course, it would be do nothing. Right? I found that recently my guilty pleasure has been GOT, Game of Thrones. I'm now re-binging in preparation.
No kidding.
Final. As this goes out, and people know this, the final season will be probably even done. But damn, I'm looking forward to that.
My wife loves that show.
Oh my God! Yeah. So we've all got our own.
Fantastic.
As we finish up, please tell our audience, our viewers and listeners, where they can find out more about you, Rob, and about your resources that you offer, the book, etc. Please share all those kinds of things.
I'll keep it simple. The easiest thing to do is to go to donothingbook.com. It has all the social links there that you can connect with me. I will respond to you. I'm very active and aware of everybody, and I love interacting. And if you want to join the list, we'll keep you updated on things. And we have some resource guides there as well if you're looking for some information on all the things that you and I just talked about.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure and an honor having you here. Thank you for all the wonderful things you've shared. It's been a joy, really has.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you're doing with your great work in this world. I really appreciate it, Dov.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, if you want to hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this show or any of our past episodes, you can go over to our Facebook page and just look for Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. And there you can do that. If you want to find out how you can work with me, how you can hire me as a speaker or as a strategist for your organization or for yourself, you can go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. And you need to be aware that the research consistently shows that even the fastest growing companies face the same challenge in that they're spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing top talent, only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in training and developing your top talent, only to have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com. because you can't outsource authenticity. Also, you can take yourself over to the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need any triple W, just matrix like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $197. It's absolutely free for you to tune in today and you find out your true leadership strengths. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Until next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you could possibly do nothing and be more productive. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach the next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.